Hollywood has a number of flops in the recent years, and even their successes have not done all that well. What is going on? Why are they struggling so much? Hollywood killed the story. Welcome to Into the Desert, exploring the wilderness ideas. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe buttons. And if you want to support our channel and our mission of encouraging discussion, not division, please join us on Patreon. The link is in the description. So Larissa, I know you're a big fan of movies and TV, books, all the story genre, and I recently heard that Foundation, one of my favorite book series,
Mine too.
was going to be on TV, and I was really looking forward to watching it. I looked at some of the reviews, and the reviews stated they butchered the story. The visuals were fantastic, but the storyline was not what people who were fans of the book really wanted to see. So we've decided to wait until it comes out onto a service that we already pay for rather than paying for a new service to be disappointed. So what's your view on what's going on? Why can't Hollywood seem to adapt movies?
Yeah, I think there's a number of things that are going on. First and foremost is Hollywood doesn't know how to adapt a story. They tend to take a story that's done well. I mean, Foundation has a huge fan base. I remember reading it as a kid and just loving this idea of predicting the future using knowledge of every bit of human society. And that whole concept was just fascinating, and how you could manipulate society just if you knew enough about it.
Psychohistory.
Yeah, psychohistory, exactly. And the visuals of being something far into the future and space, it just pictures in your head so easily. But then they have to take the story and create some sort of mainstream message that completely counteracts the intention and what made the story so well in the first place. Yeah. And I mean, you see that with Snow White, right? You look at the 1937 version of Snow White, and then you hear all the criticism about the 2025 version of Snow White, and it flopped because they took Snow White that everybody loved and had to change it to meet some sort of modern ideology or messaging, and you lose what's important of the story. And it's not hard to take a story and adapt it. There have been plenty of successes, but Hollywood doesn't learn from the successes, they do their failures.
Lots of stories Hollywood does come from other things. And Hollywood made an adaptation of Shakespeare's The Tempest, but it was Shakespeare in space. They took the Tempest, they converted it over into what they wanted it to be, which was a space story, and then they renamed it. It's called Forbidden Planet, 1956. A classic and a really good movie. And you can go to the movie and you can enjoy it because you're going to Forbidden Planet. If you kind of know that, you're recognizing pieces of the Tempest as you're watching it, that's fine. That's like an Easter egg at that point. But if they had released it as The Tempest, and they called it The Tempest by William Shakespeare, but they said it in space, that would have been horrible.
Yeah, you see the same thing with Clueless from 1995 with Alicia Silverstone. It was an adaptation of Emma, and it was written as an adaptation, but it was written for a modern audience. It was designed for teenagers. The director, screenwriter did a whole bunch of research with those Beverly Hills teenagers to create something that was relevant. And she got a lot of pushback. They were saying, this is too serious of a movie and nobody's going to watch it. And it is a classic, and it has set the stage for many teen dramas since then yes, it's Emma, and yet it's not Emma. It has her own message. It has her own stories. And she called it Clueless. She didn't call it Emma.
Even when you do something and you keep the name and you keep the characters, even if you do it really well, it can still cause problems. For example, Tom Cruise was in a movie with Reacher, which is a whole series of Lee Child's books, which are really good. And I heard from a lot of people that Reacher was the Tom Cruise version was good, except Tom Cruise was not Reacher. Reacher is a 6'4". He stands there and he dominates people by his very size. Tom Cruise was wonderful in the movie, but he just wasn't Reacher. And now in the recent release version, you have Alan Rickerson, who does a very good job, and he looks like Reacher. And maybe, I'm not going to judge whether he's a better actor or not, but in terms of casting, Jack Reacher, he's definitely a better choice than Tom Cruise was.
Yeah. And that leads nicely into how Hollywood uses things like Tom Cruise. He's a big name actor. You put his name on a movie and people are going to go see it. They're going to go because they like Tom Cruise. And so Hollywood is looking for things that have that name recognition. And sometimes it's by putting an actor like Tom Cruise in a part that he just doesn't look the part. Other times you take something like my favorite book series, Artemis Fowl, and you turn it into a movie that has zero resemblance to the books. And it had this great name and it has these beautiful visual effects. But when you start to look at the storyline, you have an evil genius 13-year-old kid that has this beautiful arc where he learns empathy and he learns how to interact with people. And that's the story of the book. And this movie is, well, one, the main character was surfing, which I don't understand. And then two, he didn't actually come up with any ingenious plots. It was his dad's plots, which the whole thing makes no sense. And they've done that with so many other things. And you look at, Percy Jackson, and they just dumbed down the stories. I love Percy Jackson. Lots of kids learn Greek mythology and Egyptian mythology and Norse mythology because of Rick Riordan's stories. He's been a wonderful author. And the movies just dumb down his work and they make no sense. Now you look at the TV shows and they kind of are learning a bit from their mistakes.
I remember I went to see the movie Tommy because I loved the rock opera. And so I went to it when it was premiered in Hollywood. And it was so disappointing. They hired big name stars who couldn't sing. And Anne Margaret, if I remember right, she was in the film, but she could sing. But most of the other people, you're scratching your head as to why are they in a musical?
Yeah, you see that with lots of things. And the sad thing is even when Hollywood does come up with a good adaptation or a movie, and I know this is probably controversial, but the movie Home, I really like it. It's cute. It's fun. It's a fun thing to have in the background. I like the music. I like kind of the storyline. There's this innocence about it. And then I found out it was from a book. And I'm very, very, very grateful that I didn't know about the book beforehand and I hadn't read the book beforehand, because then I would have hated the movie. But Home is a good movie in and of itself. When you read the book, which is The True Meaning of Schmeck Day by Adam Rex, they're nothing alike. And as an adaptation, it really, I think it's why most people didn't even go see the movie or like the movie, is because they made it as an adaptation of this book when it had nothing to do with the book.
Well, you can even have a good adaptation like Harry Potter. I liked the first two. I read all the book series. I liked the first two movies. But then as you get into 3, they seem to move further and further away from the Harry Potter of the books. And they transferred more and more into, 21st century teenagers. And it's like, why, if you take something that people love, why are you changing it? It's like I'm gonna take the Mona Lisa and I'm gonna paint a mustache on it because I think that'll make it better. And they do it over and over and over again, but they do make some good adaptations.
Well, yeah. One of my biggest problems with the Harry Potter film was the outfits. A huge part of the Harry Potter book is how the outfits of the wizarding world, when they try to look like muggles, and that comedic part of it was just such a huge part of the book. And it was something that seemed to be pretty easy to translate onto screen, and it didn't translate at all. And I was so looking forward to the Quidditch World Cup and to see some old man in a pajama thinking he was dressed like a muggle, and that scene didn't even show. Like, everybody looked normal. They looked like they could fit into the muggle world just fine. On the other hand, the TV series Discovery of Witches, which was based off of the book by Deborah Harkness, was a wonderful translation. And the costumes on that one, especially in season 2, I want to meet that costume designer, because they brought to life everything that I pictured in my head. The set design, the costumes, and then the story just kept with everything. Yes, there were some minor changes, but they weren't important to the story of the book. They didn't change the meaning of the book.
And sometimes you do have to make changes. I remember reading Ready Player One, which was, it was almost written for my generation in some respects, because all the video games and all those things I remember coming out live and playing them live, particularly Joust. And that was great. And the puzzles and the way he did it was fantastic. That wouldn't translate into a visual medium as well. And so when they did the movie, they made lots of changes in the movie, but somehow those changes seemed to work. I know there were people upset, but I enjoyed both the movie and the book because they remained faithful to the genre, which was they're basically taking a genre for 1980s video games, but they were transforming it into modern video games to make that transition. So it
kept the nostalgia.
Yeah, I think it worked. Other ones don't always.
No. Well, and even Stardust, it wasn't as big of a hit, but again, another one where I watched the movie, then I read the book, and it was like I'd seen the movie and I read the book, and they were like the same story except for the ending. And it's one of the few times where I think the ending of the movie was better than the ending of the book. The ending of the book kind of left me feeling like it was lacking something. And it's one of the things that I really liked was it kept with the heart and the meaning behind Neil Gaiman's book, yet it just amplified it. It just put a nice little pretty bow on the top with the changing. And I think Hollywood can do that. Hollywood can take a movie, they can take a book, they can take a beloved story, and they can enhance it like they did with Ready Player One and Stardust. But if they're doing it to make a point, if they're doing it to make a message, then you're going to lose something. If you want to make a message, then find a story with that message. So let's go back to the Snow White, right? They wanted to show girl power. They wanted to make a classic fairy tale with a girl boss type character. They could have easily found a book. One of my favorite series is The Lunar Chronicles by Marissa Myers, and it features really powerful women that lead the story and come to their own. And it does this in a beautiful framework of a fantasy adventure film, and yet it's very clearly the fairy tale that we all know and love. So if you want to take a fairy tale we all know and love and show that girl boss, find the stories that do it. Don't take something and then bastardize it. I don't even know the right term of how they take these movies and they remove the heart from the movie.
They don't like the core message, so they just change the core message and don't understand sometimes what they're changing. It's the corporatization in many respects of Hollywood, except the people that are running the corporations are not, the first generations who knew how to please an audience. They're second generation, third generation, fourth generation, but they're in there looking at only the numbers. It's the same thing we looked at earlier with IT gaming. They they want to get a franchise that's really popular, then they completely change this. It's like you saw with the Robert Jordan's book, Eye of the World.
Yeah, it's
Excuse
Wheel
me.
of Time.
They vastly changed the story, and to the point that it you didn't even recognize it. You could sort of recognize the names and you could sort of recognize the characters, but some of it they didn't even, they just wanted to change it to a modern messaging system, and they weren't as familiar. You see this with some of the Witcher series when it came out. Some of the writers were fairly vocal. They didn't even like the game, and they didn't like the story of the books, but they wanted to adapt it into something to where eventually even the lead actor who really did like the story in the books quit because he didn't like what they were doing with it.
Yeah, and you hear that more and more often. The stories of like Princess Bride, where they tried for decades to get this story that they were very passionate about and to make a film out of it. And they go through all the hurdles because they were passionate about the story. And you see that in the final product. That movie is a classic for a reason, because you see the passion behind the story. And when you're doing it for the money, when you're doing it because of a bottom line, and when you have a CEO that is looking at, we're losing money, we're in the red, we're doing bad, these movies cost millions of dollars, we need to make sure that it's a hit, where's the heart?
Yeah, well, they're
Where's
trying
the
to play
love?
it safe.
Exactly.
Yeah. But even then, they'll go out and buy a bestseller that's a novel. They'll adapt it, but they'll change to where the people who come to see the story don't even recognize the story they loved and the story they thought they were coming to see.
No, they have this idea that those of us who read books are so much more than those that go to see movies. And I think it really attacks the intelligence of a movie viewer in thinking that they're not smart enough to know something bad when they see it.
Yeah. Well, again, this is something that ties back to our gaming video, though we didn't really get into this aspect of it. But you had all these successful game series from the 80s and early 90s, and virtually all those studios and games just disappeared. And the reason why is they died on the altar of technology. Everyone was doing 3D environments, and we really played some of the games where you could actually do more. The game was more, quote, open world in the 2D environment than they could do in the current technology of the 3D environment. Of course, that's now changed, and they can now do that in a full 3D environment. But you went from these games that were big and vast and you could walk around into transitioning through a very narrow set of corridors, because that's all 3D could do at the time. Well, you see this in movies where they do these huge budgets on CGI, and I've literally been, like, they'll do a fight scene. I've been in a movie and it's just one CGI and one character throwing another character into a building and another character throws the other character in a building, and I literally get bored and say, enough already. There's just nothing there. I've seen that CGI scene so many times. It's just not interesting, and they're just spending all their budgets on things I don't even care about.
And you see that in so many things. And, again, they think, well, you're there for the action, you're there for the adventure. And yeah, there are times where I want to go see a good action film, but that's what those Fast and Furious movies are for. I don't go to those movies because I'm expecting a story. I go to those movies
Really?
because I want to see something blow up, right? But
Yeah.
when I go to a movie, when I'm really going to spend that kind of money, movies are expensive to go to. And if I'm going to spend that money to go to a movie, I want to see something I know is going to entertain me. And some of the best movies that I have ever watched are low budget films. One of my favorite movies is Return to Me. And it's David Duchovny, Minnie Driver. It's from 2000. It was not a very big hit. It's one of those movies Hollywood made and, didn't do anything to advertise, but it is a beautiful movie. And even that kind of movie, it had a budget of $24 million. It made $36 million. So it made a profit. But it's one of the best movies ever. And there's no CGI, or if there is, it's very, very minimal. It's filmed on the streets of Chicago. Bonnie Hunt took her crew out there and just walked around the different parts of Chicago and filmed it. And there's just the characters, their interaction. It's all organic. It's all character driven. And it is a story that I watch over and over. And every time there is something new that I can learn. And it's a world I just want to jump into and be a part of because it's so organic and it's so real and yet tells a beautiful story. And there's lots of movies. You know, you think about some of the biggest hits in Hollywood, you know, movies like Clerks, right? The guy had $27,000, took a bunch of his friends in high school, college, and used his job to film a movie. He had $27,000 and he made $3.1 million, right? Because he was telling a good story. Star Wars had an $11 million budget and made $307 million. Mad Max had a budget of less than $1 million and made $100 million. Even Ghost, it only had a budget of $22 million and made $505 million. My Big Fat Greek Wedding, one of the best rom-coms ever, had a budget of $5 million and made $374 million. Why? They all have something in common. They told a good story, a character-driven story with heart and realism. Even if some of them, like, okay, we're talking about ghosts or we're talking about a dystopian future, the stories still had heart. The stories still had realism to that.
Well, tell us what you think. Movies are something everyone knows. These are our opinions. Maybe you disagree, maybe you agree. Tell us what you think in the comments. And if you've made it this far in the video, we want to thank you. Thank you for watching. And please consider sponsoring us on Patreon. Thank you.